I'm in very good company today because to my left, I have Lyndon Lazarus, the founder or co-founder of WatchCheck, the world's first fully digital concierge, best-in-class watch service white glove. We also have Jeff Hess, the global head of Sotheby's Watches. He's a man that needs probably very little introduction to the people in this room. And likewise, we have Alexander Kraft, the CEO and chairman of Sotheby's, Sotheby's International Realty France. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are here at this Sotheby's room with all these beautiful, important watches, lots. Jeff, if you could sort of introduce the auction and maybe highlight a few key pieces that we've got here today.
Sure, so this is, first of all, thank you for being here. This is our important and fine watches sale for the month of June for 2025. You know, I could talk about certain particularly exciting pieces in this sale, but I probably won't, and I'll make a more general observation that I'm 56 years old, and with hand on my heart, I think this is likely the best assortment of watches in an auction that I've ever been a part of, this particular sale. And in some ways that's uplifting, and in some ways that's depressing, that I think it's likely downhill from here. But we have really a special assortment of watches, and I think the thing that, the highlight for me more than anything else is seeing the shift in taste that's happened very recently. In a nutshell, around 10 years ago, for example, the watch collecting industry was dominated by vintage watch collecting. Everything was all about vintage. And then maybe about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the tide shifted and we saw a tremendous adoration toward modern watches. We even saw the development of a term called hyped watches, where people were really following trends and it was all about modern. What I'm starting to see now, and I think the great highlight for me in this sale, is seeing a little bit of a renewed love for vintage watches and scholarship. And sort of the highlight for me this week has been at our exhibition seeing so many collectors come in and talk about the nuances of watches from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and what have you. And that kind of sentiment and enthusiasm I haven't seen, at least to this degree, in a while. So that's how I would describe the sort of the highlight for me.
No, that was perfect. Couldn't have done it better. But Lyndon, Alex, I know we couldn't get Jeff to pick perhaps a favorite lot, but is there anything that you're willing to share in terms of a favorite lot that you've seen at the risk of somebody else trying to bid on it?
As you know, I'm a man of strong opinions, and I'm not afraid to share them. I mean, there's so many great watches here. I mean, if you look at the Al Capone watch, you know, talking about the original gangster, I mean, just imagine that, you know, having in your pocket, pulling this out. I mean, you're the OG, really, with this one. Then you have the minute repeater there, you know, which is an incredible timepiece, and I love what they've done here with the sample studio. I also like always quirky timepieces, double-signed timepieces. We have several of those. Here you have the double-signed Equinaut in gold, which looks very ordinary, but then, you know, it's a gold and it's double-signed. The same with the two Asprey watches. I'm also an Asprey collector, so I might have to bid on this one. Thankfully, I already have a good stock of Daytona, so I just saved a few million there. But, you know, as Jeff said, it's really a very, very tempting sale. So, you know, my fiance, please, you know, lock me away on Tuesday so I don't bid too much.
Lyndon, what about yourself?
Yeah, it's a really incredible compilation of both vintage, modern, I think everything in between. I was very, very impressed with the kind of conglomeration of incredible vintage Patek Philippe, especially complicated variants. I'm a tremendous fan of the chronographs, perpetual calendars. Obviously, there's lots to be said about the pink gold 2499, which I'm sure will be a sight to see. The 1463, which is a chronograph variant that Patek Philippe made in the 40s and 50s. They have an incredible example in stainless steel with Breguet numerals, which I'm a tremendous fan of. The case construction, the dial construction is really tremendous, and the condition that I think this has been in is pretty wowing for sure. So that's been very impressive, and then obviously all the obscurities from the Al Capone watch to David Bowie's, the late David Bowie's incredible gifted watch. I think there's lots of intricacies within all of this stuff. So definitely a sale to be proud of for sure.
So obviously it's a journey for us to get to a point where we're all quoting reference numbers and models. How did you all first get into watch collecting? What was your gateway? I mean, for me, it was my grandfather. He sold watches, and so I joke that it's quite genetic for me to be down with the sickness, as we say at Time and Tide, with watches and just being totally addicted. So what about you, Lyndon? Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so I've been into watches and I think adjacent spaces for as long as I can pretty much possibly remember. My parents are in the audience and can speak to my early addiction into this wonderful space. But I think that the kind of collectible, the intricacies that exist within watches, I think were very appealing, combined with the fact that I think watches are one of the very few displays of taste that I think you can carry with you. I think lots of these collectible items might be stored in a vault or in a house, but watches are one of the ways that I think you can signal this knowledge, this expertise, and this taste on your wrist and carry it with you. So I have been a astute collector for almost a decade now, and very pleased to have seen some incredible stuff, but some really kind of close to the top of the possible things you could see in this room today. So very cool stuff for sure.
Jeff?
You know, as a watch collector, we're so often asked, how'd you get your start? Where did it all begin? I don't have a great answer to that, but the question that I wish we would ask more of is where did it all lead? What's the end game? Where did the road lead? And for me, that's in large part really the greatest joy. And when I look around this room, even today, that's how I would answer that question. There's 100 friends here. That's just extraordinary. And the watch world benefits from such a great sense of community and friendship. I always like to say that I'm born and bred in New York City. Other than college, I've never lived anywhere else. But because of the watch world, I have a bed to sleep in every major city across the globe. I don't avail myself of those beds, but it's really an incredible thing. So when I think about how I got my start, I really like to think about where that road led and all the incredible relationships I've made along the way.
Thank you. Alex?
When I heard Lyndon talking, I felt very old. You know, I'm a Gen Xer, and according to Instagram, those are people who are between 50 and 60 years old, who look about 30 to 40 years old, and who have the mind of an 18 years old. So probably me. So, you know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and back then what people wore were not Rolexes or Pateks. They wore, you know, G-Shocks, the original ones, and Swatch, and you know, all sort of cheap watches. And I also got my start from my grandfather, who left me 3 very addictive things: suits, cigars, and watches. So it started there. Then it went on. You know, my first graduation present from law school was a Rolex Submariner 5512 that got robbed in Buenos Aires at knife point, but that's another story. I got very early into Rolex Daytonas from my Italian friends, so when they didn't cost, you know, didn't have the price of a townhouse. Then the collecting became wider. Recently, I lost a big part of my collection due to a robbery. But at the end of the day, for me, I really have, you know, a few favorite pieces that I always wear, no matter how big the collection was. And for me, that's one of the things really you have to have a connection with it. You have to have a gut feeling, and that really hasn't changed in the many years I've been collecting.
Well, speaking of connections and favorites, if I may ask, would everybody be willing to share what their favorite watch is in their personal collection? I'm happy to start. My personal favorite watch that I own, it's kind of an obscure watch. It's a Crador H2. It's a Japanese watch with a spring drive movement, but it is finished, dare I say, to a Philippe Dufour level standard, and it's just, it was my grail, and so I'm so glad to own it. But are you guys willing to share personal favorites in your collection? London?
I think that for me, I think the eclectic things always kind of draw my eye a little bit more so than the mainstream. I think that collectors kind of form this little bit of a circular path of being first interested in the things that I think are iconic, that we see in movie posters, that we can remember from history. I think as collectors dive deeper into that rabbit hole, you get into some of the obscure things, some of the things that you might not expect someone to walk past the street wearing a similar example. And then I think you kind of come back around to why those watches are so iconic, and why the best of the best, the things that we see in this room, are things to be acclaimed for. So I think that I have gone past that circular mark and then back into the eclectic stuff. So I'll talk about a watch that I'm wearing on my wrist right now. I think that people have large associations and connotations with Rolexes of all styles, whether it be Submariner or Day-Date, all the kind of iconic moments of this, the history of the brand. But I'm wearing something that I think is a little bit more interesting. It's a 1938 Rolex Disco Volante. So it was made in stainless steel. I can see some nodding their head with agreement for the oddity that it is.
I'd never seen it.
Zach had never seen it, so it's always fun to surprise some real experts. But it's got a sector dial, a very cool variation. This was right at the moment where Rolex first kind of founded and patented this waterproof case design, and during that moment they produce some watches that I think are a little bit more eclectic and that get smiles from even the most kind of astute watch collectors. So I'm back on that path for sure as of now.
Okay. Jeff?
Well, given that we are sitting maybe 10 yards from Jane Birkin's Birkin bag, which is right outside, I thought it was befitting to wear today, and maybe I'll talk about briefly an Hermes watch that I'm wearing. It's called Les Folies du Ciel. It's the Follies of the Sky, the Follies of the Sky. And in 1984, Hermes created this design for use on a lady's scarf, and they turned it into an artistic dial. It's all hand painted and hand engraved. So most people know me for vintage Rolex, and they don't typically expect me to have a big bird on my wrist with 2 balloons. But it was a great joy buying that about 3 years ago. And one last comment about the watch. When you're really into watches, you so frequently think, is this a safe purchase? And that's a very fair question. Is this a safe purchase? Can I get my money out if I need to sell this? Is there a market for this? This was a rare instance. I'm so trained into thinking that way that this was a rare instance. When I bought it, I said, okay, I'm going to lose 50% of the value right when I walk out the door on Madison Avenue. And there was something that actually felt good about that I was buying it because I loved it so much that it transcended price and it didn't matter. I wasn't thinking about resale. And I think that actually was a relieving feeling for a change.
Alex, what about you?
Well, again, to make perhaps a little contrast with Lyndon, he very interestingly described the cycle of collecting. So having a little bit advance in years to you, I'm back in another part of the cycle, because I started, with the classics, then I went for the grails, then I went for the more exotic stuff, and now I'm back to the classics actually. And one of my favorite watches is probably the Paul Newman, just because I love the guy, I love the story behind it, I love the patina, and frankly, it just sits perfectly on the wrist. You put it on, it's like a favorite pair of shoes, a favorite suit, favorite car. And you can never go wrong, and if I'm in a bad spot, and I need to bail myself out because I'm thrown into Guantanamo, I might sell this and buy my way out,
Yeah, look, I think it's very evident how precious watches are to their owners and to the collectors, and a huge part, of course, of being an owner of a watch is maintaining it, right? And we need clear avenues to be able to ensure that we can safely and properly have our watches serviced which is why it's so wonderful that we have WatchCheck as a platform. And the value of the platform has certainly been recognized in the fact that Sotheby's has partnered with WatchCheck to create Sotheby's Watch Services so that they're also able to offer best-in-class repair. I had the pleasure of attending the launch dinner in November of WatchCheck, so I'm pretty versed in it, but I'd like you to share, Lyndon, with the audience here, what exactly is WatchCheck? How does it work?
Yeah, of course. And I think for a little bit of background on kind of the servicing need, I think we get to all come to wonderful experiences like this that Sotheby's puts on, to have these kind of, as I call them, champagne and a cookie experiences, being able to buy watches, right? Coming into a wonderful room, speaking to knowledgeable folks, and really getting this kind of primo A1 experience to purchase watches. And I think one of the things that really struck me in my years of selling watches and being in the watch industry and being a collector especially, is how drastic the dichotomy between that experience is and the experience of servicing or maintaining a watch, which is something that every collector has to go through in that life cycle of ownership. So essentially what WatchCheck is WatchCheck is made to replicate that champagne and a cookie experience that customers get while purchasing something, while servicing something. And what does that mean? So that means that, you know, when we were kind of envisioning the platform of what servicing could be, as a collector, we went and spoke with our friends, our colleagues, and thought, what could the best experience possible look like? And that would be all the servicing done at the click of a button. That would be doing everything seamlessly, all from the comfort of your home. That would mean flat rate pricing, so that you don't have to go through an intense quote process that might end up being wrong when your watch actually comes back and now you have to pay this incredible sum you weren't expecting. That would be tracking your service every step of the way. That would be visibility and transparency. One of the things that, you know, happens time and time again in the traditional service process is that the people facilitating the service actually don't care much about helping with service, right? They're there to sell a watch, or they're there to facilitate a different client experience. And what that's led to is a lot of collectors who feel neglected, who don't feel like they're getting this tailored service experience that really they deserve, right? If you purchase something that's so wonderful and so meaningful, you should be able to have an experience that replicates the meaningfulness of that watch and the nature of these goods. So, you know, we provide a 24/7 concierge service to allow, you know, customers to access personnel that are just there to help them with their service experience. And I think what we've been able to do over the past, you know, months and years, and now our wonderful partnership with Sotheby's, is create an experience in which customers love servicing their watch. I think one of the great kind of pleasures of owning and operating and facilitating these services is, you know, seeing the smile on collectors' faces, getting love letters from collectors talking about the difference in experiences that they've had prior and the experiences they're having with WatchCheck. So we feel very lucky to be providing these great experiences. We feel very lucky to be working with incredible companies like Sotheby's to be our wonderful partner, and to be able to provide these to hopefully as many collectors and owners in the future. So.
And Jeff, can you share how this partnership came to be? How did this all come together?
You know what, I'm going to say it even more simply than Lyndon just said it. For whatever reason, the concept of servicing your watch, fixing a broken watch, it's really god-awful. I don't understand. It's so terrible. The truth is, most of the watch industry lives in the first week of ownership of a watch or the last week of ownership of a watch. Most of the watch industry is either selling a watch for you or selling a watch to you. The 98% in between, the real period of watch ownership, nobody's paying any attention to. You know, your car breaks, you go to the local garage, you have a mechanic. For whatever reason, the watch world just doesn't have it. We have yet to figure out how really best it is to service a watch, and you end up with the conversation that I have periodically, which is, oh, I know a guy, I've got a guy. And Lyndon is a real visionary when it comes to this, and brought this notion to us, this concept, the WatchCheck concept to us, and we were kind of blown away about it. And you have to really think about the enormity of this. Sotheby's we did $6 billion in revenue last year and $8 billion the year before. There's 2,000 employees. It is very unusual for a company of this stature, we're 200 years old, to partner with a startup. And we're doing that because this service is that good. It is truly extraordinary. And the notion of, okay, I have a guy, he's on the 5th floor of some walk-up on 47th Street, or he's in upstate New York and he comes once a week and does his rounds to pick it up. Those days are over. The reality is, it's really very simple. You log in, you tell them what's wrong with your watch. It's as simple as my watch is broken, here's my credit card. They send you a box. It's self-addressed stamped envelope in essence. You put your watch in and it's coming back next month fixed. You never leave your living room. There's no more estimate. It's very simple, no nonsense. So the days of climbing to the bowels of 47th Street and finding that guy, the black hole as we call it, they're really over when it comes to WatchCheck. And when I heard this, I was like, oh my God, this is actually brilliant. So we're so excited to be launching this, and I'm positive. If I could buy options on this, I would.
And just real quick, because one of the things that I first noticed at the dinner was how carefully thorough the design of the box itself in terms of packaging. I know from experience when I've had to send watches back for service, they just effectively say, go to FedEx and do it yourself. And I'm like, how do I make sure that my very precious watch is going to stay safe when it's sent? But it was all very considered. Can you tell us about the design of the box?
I think that, one of the things that I was very kind of adamant with our team about is that the actual shipping experience is kind of the one physical interaction we have with customers, right? They have this wonderful experience online. We make this, experience easy through a digital platform, and then you have this in-person experience. And for all of you that might want to check out what that in-person experience looks like, we have a couple of shipping kits lying around for you to see what that actually looks like. But I think the point of the service and the point of the shipping experience is that you can do it all very simply, from the comfort of your home. One of the things that I've probably screamed at our team much too much about is that, we have customers that don't know that the gear icon is settings, right? And we want to be able to have an incredible experience for young collectors, for people who are technologically savvy, but also for anybody who can, simply log into a platform, have this wonderful experience and have a kind of a coinciding shipping experience. So it is all of loading your watch within 15 seconds into a shipping kit, getting instructions for exactly how to pack it. You don't need tape or labels or bubble wrap. There's no materials needed. And then you can schedule pickup right through the platform, right from home. So from your living room to your living room, you can service your watch, which is fantastic. And I think that there's been a lot of time and care and effort done to make sure that experience is coinciding with.
Zach, I'm going to jump in for a second. We don't want this to turn into an infomercial today because that's just not fun. But it really does trigger an important lesson in business and in life, and it's really all about trust. And at the end of the day, even beyond the rigors of finding the guy to fix your watch, you really want to make sure that your precious timepiece is fixed well, and you can trust it. Now, you might be sitting here saying, well, I'm going to send a watch to Lyndon and Jeff. That's insane. It actually would be ridiculous. But the reality is, who's doing the work is really what's most important. And I don't know if that's coming up in later. I don't know what your questions are. But I think it's very important that we reflect upon the watch is going to Dayton, Ohio. And it's going to a company called Stoll & Company, S-T-O-L-L. Stoll & Company is unequivocally the greatest watchmaking shop in America. There's 100 people sitting in this incredibly impressive, let's call it factory. There's over 40 watchmakers, at least 60 people who are doing polishing and all kinds of other services related to the watch. When you buy a watch on eBay, if anybody's had that experience, you'll see there's this whole authentication thing. Every watch that's sold on eBay goes through Stoll. They're the authenticators for eBay. This is really, really first rate. In a nutshell, your watch is broken. They're sending you a box. It's going to Dayton, Ohio, and it's coming back next month fixed. So it's really got to be about trust. And like in any business, that's really the cornerstone of why we're so impressed by WatchCheck.
And so we're coming up on the end here, but Alex, what I just wanted to ask you real quick, as somebody who's owned various vintage watches, how do you, prior to service, how do you best take care of these watches? What do you do in terms of keeping them safe, keeping them clean?
Well, first of all, we were talking about not making this an infomercial, so let me share a quick anecdote because I think it's really, really a great initiative, and I'm actually going to copy your business model for cars also, because it's the same thing. The brands, they don't care at all about servicing these days, be it watches or cars. As Jeff said, they just want to sell to you or resell for you, but they don't care what's in the middle. And the one thing that really happened to me is, one day I actually happened to be friends with the managing director of Rolex in France, and I needed one of my Rolexes serviced. So I went over to his office on Parc Monceau. We had a coffee in his office, very civilized. I gave him my watch. He said, "Oh, we'll take care of it. You come back in 2 weeks." I came back. He hands me his watch, and I look at the watch, and I say, "That's not my watch." And he says, "What's wrong?" Well, I said, "Everything. Where's my dial? Where are my hands? What's this case? I mean, it's been polished. It looks like a football, not a case." And I said, "Where are my original parts?" And he said, "We no longer give those back to you because they are resold on the gray market." And I said, "Well, not in those terms, but fuck you very much." But because for me, the beauty of a vintage watch is the patina, is that you see the passage of the years, and if it's erased systematically by the big houses, you can't use them anymore. And again, you have to find this guy on 47th Street or somewhere in the back alleys of Nice or Paris. So I think it's really a great thing. And as with cars, for example, which I collect also, if you have to actually use them. You can't have your watches sitting just in a vault or bank safe. You have to wear them. They have to be wound, they have to be worn. Just like a car, you have to fire it up, you have to take it around the block, you have to service it regularly, even if you don't wear them, some of them so often. So it's really about, taking care of them in a sensible manner and, at the same time get enjoyment out of them.
Yeah, no, I firmly believe in wearing all of my watches. I don't like the idea of having any sort of safe queens. So as a real quick, and we'll open the floor to questions in just a moment, what is the most interesting watch that's been sent through WatchCheck so far, off the top of your head?
There are so many to speak of. I think that the more interesting thing maybe than the actual watches that come through are the history of these watches. And I think as a vintage kind of connoisseur myself, I think one of the amazing things that we get to talk about here is the history, the provenance of watches that are being sold in sales like Sotheby's. But also, I think one of the things that I get to experience a little bit more viscerally is not so much just the positive history, but also a lot of the negative history that happens to these watches, right? When you get watches that were passed down from generation to generation that were mishandled, stories from customers that come in of previous experiences. Now let me speak for 1 second on your question, Zach, which is we have everything from your run-of-the-mill Cartier tank to your Patek Philippe perpetual calendar to high complications from independent manufacturers and everything in between. And sometimes it gets a little bit fuzzy to see these watches coming through our doors. But I think really connecting with these collectors, seeing the stories that these watches have been through, and kind of being a positive mark on their provenance for the long term has been really, really enjoyable. So that's what I'll say on that front.
All right. Well, thank you very much, guys. Are there any questions from the audience that you would like to ask, whether myself or members of the panel? Okay.
So, quick question.
Yeah.
So, with the advent of silicone hairspring, so much concerns about that moving forward, these watches are ultimately going to have to service somewhere down the line. What do you do specifically to prepare for some of the issues that may come up 5, 10, 15 years down the road?
Of course, I think that there are always burgeoning complexities in all kinds of movements, right? Whether they be these technological innovations, whether they be kind of standards of care that I think we see rising and rising. And I think we are always on the kind of precipice and the hunt to make these experiences as wonderful and kind of coinciding with the A1 standard that collectors expect. So on something like technological innovations, I think parts of these processes are training watchmakers on best practices. Parts of these processes are preparing parts and technology and machinery to be able to offer this kind of primo service. And then part of this is informing the customer, right, on what's expected for us and what's expected for them so that they can get the best experience possible. So that answers the question.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Please feel free to check out all the incredible lots that are in these cases for the upcoming Important Watches auction on Tuesday, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.